Okay. Good evening.
Good evening.
It's about 7 o'clock. I think I'm going to call the meeting to order because I know there are two people who are absent, but they both said they would be. So I think we have everybody, which is great. This is a meeting of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission. It's just after 7 o'clock on Tuesday, November 15, and we will start with the roll call. Brandon Bowersox? Okay, I'm here. Gary Zico?
Here.
Michelle Guerra, she said she'd be absent. Audrey Ishii.
Here.
Morgan Johnston.
Here.
Sue Jones.
Here.
Brian Lake.
Here.
Nadine Schmitz. Ray Spooner said he would be absent. And Brad Bennett. Okay, so we've got a quorum. Does anybody want to make a motion to approve tonight's agenda? Okay, great. Motion by Morgan and a second by Nadine. Any changes to the agenda? I haven't heard of any. Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Hi.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Then on to approval of minutes. We have minutes from the September 20 meeting that were sent around again today. I hope people got a chance to look over them. And I wonder if anybody has corrections or a motion to approve them.
I have one correction. I was present.
Ah, very good. Okay, perfect. We can add Nadine to the present list. Any other corrections? At least you weren't on the absent. Okay, good.
Yeah,
Gary?
On the very last line, this is just a pet peeve of mine. This meeting was recorded on videotape. Is that true?
That
There's a
is
tape? They are really tapes?
Yeah, they do make a backup tape.
But they're recorded on disc, I'm sure.
It's digitally recorded.
Okay,
So it has also
anyway.
been recorded on
Anyway,
tape.
it should be video recorded, but just,
Okay.
anyway.
I'll ask. I'll see what the best way to word that is. Okay, so we'll add Nadine, and we have the suggestion about checking into how we say it's recorded. Any other corrections? Okay, does somebody want to make a motion to approve with that change?
I'll move to approve.
Okay, motion by Sue,
I can second.
seconded by Gary. All in favor, say aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, that carries. So we have public input time, but nobody came to address us tonight. We will move on to our business items. And the first is more about the campus bike master plan. Morgan Johnston is here with, I know last time we distributed the plan, so tonight she has some updates and information and some particular questions and discussion spots, some of the particular spots in the plan that it would be helpful to hear input about. So I'll hand it over to Morgan.
Okay, so if you remember, we just handed out the plan. We talked a little bit about what was included, and I hope you all had a chance to take a look at it. Did you have a chance to take a look at it? Yes. Okay, good. There, as you may recall, on the plan there were a few areas that were marked as areas to be determined or study areas. I want to talk about just one of those with this group. I think it's a good. We haven't really delved into any in-depth discussions about this particular one, and I just wanted to get that started, and I thought you guys would be great for this particular conversation, which is the connection between Goodwin Avenue and Matthews Avenue, and how bicyclists should be or would like to be routed between that in east-west fashion. So what I pulled up on the screen here is a aerial photo of that space that I'm talking about. It's just between Green Street and Nevada and Oregon. The two streets, Nevada and Oregon, are Urbana streets, and they're one way. You know, Oregon goes in towards Matthews and then down on Matthews and out on Nevada. And so it's not really a question down there where there's a street. It's really, let me zoom in again. Oh, too far. Can't be between, okay. It's really about this connection. There are three formal pathways through here for pedestrians, at least. One is between the church and Burrell. It's to the north of Burrell Hall, and that is the officially designated bike path from the 60s and 70s campus bike plan. it has one of the 6-foot wide bike paths with a dashed line down the center. And then there's the pathway that's kind of at the end of Illinois Street. So you come in Illinois and you can cut through between Burrell and Morrill. And this is an area that has pretty low visibility as far as where the pedestrians might be entering and exiting Morrill and Burrell by this walk through. And if you've ridden through there, you know there's a sign that says that you should not be riding your bike through there. When the Goodwin Avenue project was designed, there was a planter installed right at the end point of Illinois in order to discourage cyclists from riding directly through there, because at the time we had not done anything with the campus bike plan, and it directed people to go north of Burrell. And so the design on Goodwin is to encourage people from Illinois to use the path to the north to go through. And there's that planter there at Goodwin, or at Illinois, I mean. And then the other one is the path that is between the Chem Life Sciences Lab and Roger Adams Lab, that is basically at the entrance to Krannert Center. And that connects with the bike path through the main quad. So because Illinois Street has bike lanes coming from the east, and the main quad has the formal bike path for getting through from the west, we have this disconnect between sort of the appropriate and encouraged route of bicyclists. If you're coming into campus from Urbana, you get to Goodwin on Illinois, and do you go north or south, or try to veer through the pedestrian area? And if you're coming through via the quad, and Daniels is a Champaign route, then when you get to this pathway, you can continue through there, but there's steps at the end. And so those are the three choices. And I just want to open it up for some basic comments, just get us started in this thought process.
One of my thoughts in looking at some of the decisions that have been made is that sometimes it seems like people are still acting as if there will be 5 bicycles an hour choosing this route. We want to make sure they're safe. And I think we need to keep in mind that, judging from the increase in bicycle traffic over the last, say, year since we've started really ramping up the improvements, we need to set things up so that we won't have bicycle congestion problems. Yeah. Assuming that bicyclists are still going to be these occasional little things going by and that need to be watched out for, I think we need to keep the future model in mind. And just looking at some of these, I could see deciding something would be fine for us now, but I wouldn't want to travel it with traffic.
Right, and we actually, we've done some counts, and I'm trying to remember, because the number that sticks in my head for Goodwin in Illinois was 250 bikes, and I think that was based on, like, if you took the peak period from the quarter till the hour until 5 after the hour, and prorated that to, if they were always doing it, it'd be 250 an hour. I think it was what that number is, but I'd have to look into it. But it is a very significant number, and our goal is to increase it. Right. So not only are we expecting it to increase, but we're trying to increase it. It's not the only goal, but one of them. And so, yeah, that's a really good point.
The recent counts on, the CCRPC just did recent counts on Illinois Street between, I'm not sure exactly where they were, but it was between
right
Lincoln and Goodwin, and it was 400?
In a day.
Right.
Right, so a 24-hour period was 400. And that's, that was at the start of the bike lane on Illinois on the north side headed in. And then they did another one. Did they do another one on the other side of Lincoln, maybe?
Gary?
Yeah, a question and a couple of comments. So I don't think I've ever continued further west on Illinois through there, and there's a building there. I mean, does the path go underneath to? Overpasses?
You can
Yeah.
you can go. You would have to go around the planter that got installed here at Goodwin.
But you can go through.
On the you
Yeah,
could
how
get
do you
up
go
on the
through?
sidewalk here, and then you can get through here. But there's a number of planters. These trees are in raised planters here, and here.
Okay, but
and
now there
possibly
seems
there.
a building there where you're.
This is an overpass.
Okay.
And there's large columns
Okay.
underneath it.
Never
so
been through there. And
yeah,
is-
I
we
have, but not
we
twice.
discourage it right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, well, you mentioned that there's a disconnect between the main quad
This one
and
comes through
Illinois,
here.
but there is Goodwin, and it has bike lanes on it. I wouldn't consider that disconnect. Sometimes you need to jog along the way, so
On
I don't see
Goodwin?
that really as a disconnect in any way. The second thing is that bicyclists are going to tend to go the shortest way,
That's why it's.
and so you're not going to
There is
get them
no
to go a
shortcut
block
in here,
north if
though.
they're going to go south again. So if there are certain routes like that one continuing west on Illinois that you really don't want them to be there, then physically prevent them somehow from doing that and make sure that the ones that they will be on will work. The one at Borough Hall, I think that has...
To the north, you mean?
Yeah,
Okay.
is that the one that has a brick paver surface? A red brick? No, because there's one that I really like on bikes because I use it, but it really makes me go slow because it's a very kind of a traffic calming surface.
I don't
It's one of
think
those.
So. Wow.
Anyway,
Doesn't look like it.
So here's where the bike lane
no,
access
where's
is
the
that
one that I
existing.
use then?
It doesn't exist.
This has some brick surface in
Maybe
here.
it's
I'm putting it in the wrong place now.
maybe it is the one in Illinois. No, yeah, it's the one further south then.
Here's the Cranert one. I'm going to
Yeah.
zoom in again.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
that's
one
it.
has a really great surface, I thought, for. Yeah, but it makes you slow down on a bike.
Yeah.
That's why I like
And
it.
that's a good thing, right.
Did you say there are stairs there?
There are stairs right here.
No.
Or
There
is there a
are-
ramp?
Oh, there's a ramp out of
Maybe
there.
there's,
There-
if I remember,
well, I
there's
guess
sort
there
of
must be a ramp for
stairs
the
on
ADA
two
at least.
sides and a
A
ramp
ramp in the middle.
in the middle.
I use that one, yeah.
But it's
Um,
a strange point to turn in and off of Goodwin from that.
Well, and
Maybe
partially
what
that's
needs to
because
be
of
addressed.
the crosswalk being right in the way. You generally wouldn't have a crosswalk through the center of an intersection. They're usually on the edges. Oh, I'm going the wrong direction here. So, does anybody use, from this group at least, use the path to the north of Burrell by the church?
Yes.
Yes.
Are you headed further north? It's the same as all the rest of the 6-foot wide.
Yeah, but just as
Paths.
far as letting you know there was a facility there, but it's just not my path, so got nothing against it. I just don't go there.
More north when I go that way. I doubt I go up there to go back south.
Yeah.
But it's 6 foot wide for bikes in addition to sidewalk for pedestrians? Or just
This one is
a
it's
single
just-
6
It's a
foot wide?
sidewalk.
Oh, it's just a single sidewalk.
Yeah, it was originally designated as a 6-foot wide bike path, but a lot of the pavement has been replaced without restriping. So I think it might be striped right in here and then unstriped here.
Huh, maybe use it.
Sort of, well, old style.
So do you want to keep doing
That-
the show of hands and see who uses the other two spots as well?
Yeah, that'd be great.
I'm kind of curious now.
So
So we
who
had two
uses-
people who said they'd use that north one, and yeah, how
And who
many?
uses the path through at Lincoln, or at Illinois, excuse me? That's 2 also. And what about the path that matches up with the main quad?
I use that one.
I'd be more likely to use that one, but I would go further.
What do you normally use, Brian?
Oregon.
These are the streets, Oregon and Nevada.
One of the one-ways.
The streets.
Going or coming.
Mhm. Wow.
Okay, well that's exactly the kind of conversation I wanted to have. We hadn't really gotten into thinking about that much yet.
So
We just knew it was a question.
I mean, I guess the only other thought I would have to add is, I'm always thinking statistically. Try to figure out where the traffic currently is
Mhm.
and make that safe.
Right.
Or another way to go about it is try to see how many accidents there might be. If there is any record of any accidents, and if it turns out you really think that statistically one of these routes is not safe for bikes and peds, like maybe the one through the ped walkway with the planters.
Right.
I know it's hard to, I bike through there, honestly. Even though the sign says, please walk your bike, I kind of gauge the crowd. And if there's a very light crowd, I'll stay on my bike. And if there's a very dense pedestrian crowd, then I'll dismount and walk my bike through. But if you think statistically that that place is unsafe, then I think you're justified in doing more measures to block bikes from getting through, and maybe put signage that says
Some arrows.
the bike lanes to the south continue this way, and the bike lanes, if you're headed to North Campus, continue that way, and route people to the Burl or to the Cranert connections, and really discourage them with signage and other measures from doing that middle one if you think statistically it's not safe.
Yeah, I think you're right. We should go out there and get some counts. Definitely. I can find out what the crash history is. It's hard to get the crash history for cyclists because
Yeah, they
a
just
lot
crash.
of people just walk away from or
But
ride
the,
away.
the other thing, of course, to consider is, well, is it unsafe because of all the planters? You know, if there's something you can do to make it safe, then that might, if everybody's using it anyway, then see if you can make enough room for pedestrians and cyclists.
Well, and that's part of it, is that each one of these three options is a reasonable path, especially if when there's so many pedestrians that a cyclist would get off and walk their bike or go very slowly, is appropriate for the safety in that area. But I don't believe it's a good idea to take all of the three of them and make them.
But why not?
Well,
Because just thinking to the idea that if there are a whole bunch of bicyclists, then shouldn't they all get directly where they're going?
yeah, I really got that from the history of the university not being able to fully maintain the designated bike routes. And so we wanted to make it, we wanted to place those routes at places that were the most appropriate instead of everywhere. Just so that
That makes sense.
it'd be easier or more likely that over the next 40 years that they get maintained well.
On the other hand, if doing them right means there's enough bicycle traffic that it stays a priority to maintain them, if they're done, if you build it, they will come, and if they're coming, then it's more likely that they'll be maintained. Whereas if you built, the kind that were there and they're not, and people don't use them, then you're not going to maintain them, and nobody's going to say, quick, paint those bike lines again that I don't use.
I have two other ideas. One is if you want to discourage people from using the dangerous one that has the planters and all the columns and posts and doorways, if you want to discourage people from using that one, another thing you might consider is removing the path that extends to the west. So as soon as, say you come down there, you come through that pass, right there where your mouse is, I believe, is a huge amount of bike parking and a painted 6 foot wide path. That's kind of the main way that you get from Matthews over to the Illini, the back entrance of the Illini Union. And there's a lot of bike parking right in there.
Yeah, the bike parking is not currently there because it's been used as a construction laydown area.
Okay.
But we are looking into a solution for that space that would put bike parking back. So that's a very good point too.
Because the fact that there's a path there and a bunch of bike parking kind of makes it logical that, well, if you're trying to get there,
you want to end there, you're going to go through
there.
Right.
The other thing I would say is maybe if you want to discourage people from using that route, rather than just saying no bikes here and telling people, well, the bike route is that way, one building that way or one building that way, another way to do it might be to make it, say that in a more positive way. Like say, fast bikes this way, or the fast route is this way. So that you get a sense that, if I'm a cyclist, I can go 10 miles an hour safely that way or that way. But if I go through this middle way, you have to do slow biking there. Like, you're going to have to slow down. There's obstacles and people and things. But if you tell people the fast route is that way, it's like, oh yeah, I want to go the fast
Yeah.
Or
way.
dedicated, find a way to say it that'll.
Or dedicated
Yeah,
bike lane.
I
or-
like that. You know, I've heard the suggestion of having certain places on campus where the sign should say, bike slow, slow down, that kind of thing. So it's kind of the other side of the same coin. Is where's the fast lane?
Right. Because to cross the quad, for example,
Mhm.
you can really, as a cyclist, cross the quad anywhere and be on any of those sidewalks if you're willing to walk your bike. But if you want to cut across the quad and zip across, you take the dedicated path.
Mhm.
So as a cyclist on campus, sometimes I think about it as like, how can I get there quickly on a dedicated fast bike route so that I don't have to slow down and mix with the other modes? And
Yeah, that's a
I
good
don't
point,
know
too.
how to communicate that in a sign, but
But that's the part of the goal, is to make the network clear and user friendly, and that seems like a really good idea. Does anybody else have any other comments about this question here, these 3 points? Okay. The
Okay.
next one that I wanted to ask about is the quad, the North Quad. So we have, through the Campus Area Transportation Study Campus Bike Plan Task Force, we have recognized that Urbana's bike plan directs cyclists into campus along Main Street, and Champaign's Bicycle Vision has bicyclists on White Street, and they line up. They line up, here's Main Street, and here's White Street, and they line up through the engineering quad,
Through the sculpture.
through the sculpture, through the fountain here. So I'm going to start over at this space. This area here, Main and Goodwin, is, it has now ramps to allow cyclists who are coming in on Main Street to get up onto this wide sidewalk by Siebel Center and NCSA and to come back out. So that's something that we changed with the university and Urbana worked together to get those ramps put in. And then there's this nice wide sidewalk through here that is, I think it's comfortable on a bike for the most part. And then we have this area here that's actually a loading dock and needs a lot of reworking in order to be safe for a cyclist. We haven't gotten into what the solutions should be there. It could be as simple as a bike route and a ramp right here where the curve is. How many of you have ridden this path?
Every morning, most mornings.
Wait, let's do hands again, because that was
wow.
See?
5.
This is-
But that's exactly where I had my thought about well, this is fine for me to pick my way through, especially in the loading dock area.
Yeah.
But if there were, when it gets congested, and sometimes it does, then it's like,
It's almost impossible, right? Because there's no curb cut here, or is there one?
right,
at the,
and you're doing this weird dodge and weave, and you can't see around that wall.
and there's parked cars. This wall here at Siebel.
Mhm.
And then you get out, and
Now, that does mean you slow down, so you're not,
I think this is a stop sign too, right?
Yes,
cars are
so it's not
stopped?
that bad
That's
because the
good.
cars stop.
And then over here, there's the only ramp, I believe, is right up in this
Right.
corner. So you have to veer this way to veer this way to get
Although
through that.
the curb is degraded enough. I don't, but I see a lot of people just hop it.
Run through it. So that's a known issue, and we have
Well,
if-
and then it's
Go
the
ahead.
going through the middle of the fountain,
right.
too.
That's what I was actually focused on, was as far as the fountain goes. This issue here it needs to be redesigned with bikes in mind, and we are asking an urban planning student, Holly Nelson, is working on doing some design concepts. She's not an engineer to do the actual formal design, but she's doing trying to piece together solutions that we can find something that'll work for everybody. And of course, at this location, there's a loading dock to the south and to the north. And some people may not recognize that there's a whole other one to the north there. So that, I'm saying, that is an issue. This is the one I had a question about exactly. So bicyclists come in and go through here in order to get through from Main to White Street. And I hear often that this is a real problem, and I need to get a better understanding of what the problem is. I mean, I'm not saying I disagree with it at all, but I haven't really collected what's the problem. Is it the ground material? Is it the shape? Is it the little bumps where these drains are?
It's rough terrain there between the grates, and there's like a good hefty drop, and then like
where it switches from pavement to pavers, from concrete to pavers.
Huh.
And there's some traffic issues too, because sometimes you get a lot of like uni kids doing jogging and weird stuff there.
So they're hanging out.
You have to gauge yourself and hit the grate just right.
When you say traffic, is the traffic all north-south peds?
Yeah, there's north-south peds are the main,
Okay.
And I don't know, it depends, because I'm usually pretty early, but then other times I've gone, it's been like, okay.
So it's from the pedestrians coming up and trying to keep going to these.
Yeah,
So
and
they
it's
walk
not
through here.
insurmountable, and it's not there's traffic. You're not going to saying we're not. I don't think we're ready for a bicycle superhighway yet. Maybe next plan.
It is kind of an intersection. It's almost
Right.
I can imagine if I were a car, I'd want a yield sign or something like.
Right.
As I'm a bike zipping along this path that's mostly quiet and dedicated, I'm all of a sudden encountering a huge flow of peds coming across me. So I would almost
angles.
want
and
a roundabout.
a bicycle roundabout.
we
On
could.
this-
We
this
could
is
all go
a,
clockwise.
This is a wall
It's a
here.
wall.
Oh, okay.
And the
these
other
are
issue there is,
like
like this morning, I had to get out
orb.
and walk around the university truck but they were sweeping the path, so I thanked them.
Oh, okay.
But I thought they could have parked and left enough room for people to get by.
Huh.
Yeah,
Gary, what do you?
I mean, I've been through there quite often, and I slow down. I don't really find it any real super problem. More of a problem. It's here where there's no curb cuts on that second
Right.
line, right? That's
Right.
more of a problem.
over here.
Yeah.
I find that
Right.
more because then you have to go. Where do you have to go? You have to go out onto the sidewalk.
Yeah.
There's
here.
a ramp right
You have to go
here.
chain
Yeah,
to
you gotta
chain.
do that.
And down
too.
here.
Yeah.
And another thing is
These don't match up.
there's that's Matthews. Is that the bus? Is there a bus on Matthews coming?
No.
I've never seen
No,
one.
it'll be
Are you thinking about Wright Street?
no.
No.
But what's further east? What's next east
Goodwin.
after Math?
At
Yeah,
Goodwin?
Goodwin.
Yeah,
This
that's
is
This
where-
this here, I was heading east on Goodwin here, where the bus stopped on north. This passages coming out, and I came slowly out, poking my head, and a car came right around that bus. He never looked at me, and he didn't even really, I don't think, know that
So-
there was a stop sign.
So they just
there.
blew through the stop sign?
Yeah.
Oh, and
just ran
people
around.
blow through that.
So-
I've seen at least 3 times just when I'm coming up, somebody just drives through, and that's weird.
So I mean, I talked to Rob Patton about that. I said, I'd like a Far Side bus stop there, but he said, no, well, you can't do that because of this, that, and the other thing, but I don't know.
Wait, who did you speak to about that?
Rob Patton?
At the
At MTV?
MTD, yeah.
Okay, but I think that's actually, because it's an Urbana intersection, a Far Side, oh, you said Far Side bus stop.
Bus stop.
I'm sorry, I was thinking you
Okay.
said stop sign.
That
Okay.
means stopping.
One of the things we did
Stop.
on 6th and Peabody was add a stop sign on the other side of the street, so that this stop sign here for cars that are northbound is two-sided, like at
So is that
Race
one there.
and Pennsylvania. It is now.
I'm pretty sure tonight I went by and kind of was confused by it. Like wait a minute.
Yeah.
I almost went back and checked to make sure a student hadn't turned it around. Yeah.
I think Bill Gray said he
the
was going to
wind.
add a stop sign on the other side to
Yeah,
make that.
because when the bus is stopped here, if somebody thinks they're just passing a bus stop, they don't know necessarily that there's a stop sign. So if you make those two-sided.
Huh.
Okay, so could you, it sounds like a lot of it is congestion, and then a big part of it is the transition from the pavers to the concrete.
Right. Although again, that's not as bad as the zigzag, because that's surpassable.
So it's really this part.
Yeah.
Okay.
Further west, is there anything
And
else?
so over here, this is where, let me zoom out just a little bit. This is where the new building is being built. And it incorporates, there's a bus stop on Wright Street that will turn onto White, and pedestrians will be, or bus riders will get out there and be able to enter the building from this corner here. And so this becomes a major entrance to the building in addition to the one facing the quad. And so there's going to be a lot of bike parking in this area. Hopefully enough, or we might even add more later. But this path, they're aware that it's a bike path. When they build the building, they're going to have to actually take it out, and they'll be putting it back in. So once the construction starts, that's probably going to be a problem during the construction, just for through traffic for bicyclists. But it'll be new pavement, and then there's a project on White Street that Champaign is submitting with the Very Small Starts grant that will also modify this. It'll modify White Street, and I'd like to see it. We're going to have to get into those discussions in more detail, but I'd like to make sure it matches up with the path on the far side, because right now the path exits into the center of the street. It doesn't exit at the crosswalk. Actually, there isn't a crosswalk shown.
Well, the bike route shouldn't go into the crosswalk.
That's true, but it doesn't have, it just is one thing into the center of the intersection. And what we were trying to do, like at Goodwin, where we have the two different exits so you could be in the right path instead of in the middle of the road. But so that's the only thing to the west of the fountain.
Okay.
So it seems like this is the biggest issue.
Yeah.
And we can address that.
Okay.
All right, I have one other thing I wanted to talk about, and it's less area specific, more general, but let me get down to an example. Here, we'll use this one. So there is just north of the bell tower. Are you all familiar with the new bell tower? Maybe. In general, we have a lot of places on campus where there's a 6-foot wide bike path next to a wide sidewalk or a sidewalk. And the Campus Area Transportation Study Task Force had, generally intends to switch to wide shared use paths in areas where there are, it's not that there's insignificant, but like fewer than the huge volume bicyclist areas. And there's part of that is the same thing I was talking about earlier about reducing the amount of separated bike path areas that need to be maintained. And so you end up with, the map, which is over here if you want to take a look at it, shows a lot of green lines. And the green lines are wide sidewalks that are shared use paths. And I've had a few comments in the last few months about sort of the desire to separate the bicyclists and the pedestrians. And there was an idea I saw in Seattle, where they had, within the sidewalk area, they had just a little placard, like a stamp, a paint stamp, that was a picture of a bike. And it was only like 6 inches in diameter, maybe, as a circle with a bike in it. And I was thinking that maybe on these wide paths, it'd be interesting to use that kind of marking just to sort of point out to people that we recognize that a lot of bikes are going to be using these wide sidewalks, and also to maybe make it a bit of a game to encourage the bike riders, and I'm not sure which people would do it, but I know I would, to follow the dots. So it's like a dotted line to follow. It's not something that's currently in the manual on uniform traffic control devices. We would have to get approval to try it out. But I thought it might be an interesting idea, and I wanted to know what you guys thought of it.
Gary?
There would be one path of dots suggesting where bicyclists should be?
So on a wide sidewalk, like at this example,
Yeah.
this right now has two separated paths. It'd be one path. And there would not be a dashed line and a designated separated bike area, but but just maybe on the north or the south side, it would just have a dashed dots. Like there'd be a dot here, and another one here. You know, just a little bit of a trail marking on the pavement.
The idea being that the bikes would go on that, it wouldn't be a designated lane, but it'd be a heavy hint.
In each
Which-
direction or just on one side? I don't
Well-
see that's going to work on one side. But
I guess honestly, I was picturing it in terms of the bicyclists not being high volume in these areas. And that's part of what we're talking about, is this is an area where you don't have 5 or 6 cyclists.
But you don't
Even.
want them going down the same line coming at each other. I think that would be the big.
that's called chicken.
Yeah, that would, if you have the dots on one side, then
You'd
you're
have to have both of
asking
them.
for,
Is that the main agenda for the dots, or is the main agenda to communicate to the pedestrians that bikes are welcome here too? And that was just like an alternate agenda
Well, it's
to
just
connect the dots.
it's just kind of both of them. In one sense, we are intending to have a sign at least like once a block that says bikes yield to pedestrians at each of these. So there's a sign, there's an acknowledgement that this is a shared area. It was more about we're trying to create the full network, and yet at the same time we want to minimize the pathways that are
special maintenance.
designated because of the maintenance concerns. And I know that the snow, sometimes you'll have the snow removal on the sidewalk but not on the bike path, that kind of maintenance also. And yet at the same time we have a lot of concerns about pedestrians and bicyclists interacting. And we have there's actually a class that's looking into all of the survey feedback over the last 5 years from various surveys, various transportation surveys about bicycle pedestrian interaction on campus, because there are it's the most spoken of concern from students is. And it goes both directions.
Mm-hmm.
Bicyclists saying, "Oh, there's pedestrians everywhere," and pedestrians saying, "Oh, I can't tell if there's a bike coming." And so this was sort of toying with the idea of you don't actually have to be separated, but maybe this would kind of guide where they are within the path that they're sharing. I don't know. It's pretty vague idea.
I mean, then if you had to go in one way, you'd almost want it to be in the middle, sort of where the fast lane would be on a highway.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe it just shouldn't be moved forward.
But yeah,
It just seems like it doesn't
that
really,
just seems
it
toxic.
doesn't solve anything, maybe.
I mean, is there any recommended configuration when bikes and peds are sharing the same wide sidewalk, of whether it's most appropriate for the bikes to stay to the outside and the peds to be in the middle, or most appropriate for the bikes to be in the middle and the peds to be on the outside? Like,
No, not in the MUTCD,
Yeah.
or I don't think they have anything like that in the ASHTO guide for pedestrian
Okay.
and bicyclist facilities.
they
And,
do when you-
and we didn't talk about it in the Greenways and Trails design guidelines.
because I definitely think something to sign the path as a shared thing periodically
have-
is really good.
Yeah, we have that.
Yeah.
And one of the things that the students have already suggested is, like, just like we give out lights during Light the Night, maybe we need to give out bells. so that they're not stealth bikes with pedestrians. Or there was a student group a couple years ago who recommended they called their campaign, they called it the Love Campaign, and they wanted pedestrians to get tags for their backpacks that said I love bikes, and bicyclists to get little reflectors that say I love pedestrians. Just build a community.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was
Any other? Yeah.
I mean, the
Gary?
question, here the bike path is like 6 feet wide, right?
Mm-hmm.
The sidewalk pedestrian looks to be at 10, 12.
yeah. I'm
So
thinking it's 8
we
or
have
10.
a total of, let's say it's 10, so that's 16 feet. So you're going to take the 6 off and just leave the 10? Is that the thinking? Or would the sidewalk be made wider because you're taking off the pedestrian, the
Well,
bike path?
we had originally talked about 10-foot wide paths, but Holly was getting into the design on one of these, and she recommended we could switch to 12. So we haven't actually had a task force committee meeting in a while to discuss that, but it seems to me that the 12 makes more sense in the shared use areas on campus.
So that would be similar to the paths inside Meadowbrook Park, for example, the concrete ones in the inside.
Are those 12?
Those are 12 feet, yeah, pretty sure. And bikes and peds sort of get along there okay. And it gets pretty high traffic.
Okay. Anything else?
Any other comments? Audrey?
Or connectivity between there, taking that bike path down.
Here?
I think where it dumps, the one that, yeah, that one. Yeah, it dumps out into nothing.
This thing here?
Yeah, right, but, well, the bike path to the left there.
Oh, yeah.
The bike parking, but it doesn't go on to the,
Parking
that
lot.
Peabody.
You gotta use the parking lot.
Yeah, I usually zip through the parking lot.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I tried to shut that one off, but never tried.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a bit strange the way it just did.
So one of the things also is that I don't believe I actually got any emailed comments from you guys about the plan. Would it be helpful to have more of this kind of discussion? I could go through the different sections, like we could look at north of Green and just sort of delve into it. Would you like
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I
What
think
do
if you
people-
named areas that you were
Mhm.
concerned, it might be easier to, you know.
Well, I mean, I could take the actual map and just walk through, here's what the plan is for this map area and for this map area. We did that, I did that with this group a year and a half ago,
Yeah.
before we started the task force
Mhm.
meetings. So we could do that now.
We could do that, yeah, and
But, I
break it
mean-
into pieces and put it across the next
Mhm.
2 or so agendas, and just each
Just talk
time
about
we
different
have our
sections.
next committee meeting of this group, just look at, like you said, let's try north of Green, and then the next time we'll talk about southeast campus or
Yeah.
section by
I
section.
have it in sections in the draft document, so we can just go by those sections.
Okay.
That sounds good?
Okay, thanks everyone. And you can always email Morgan with feedback in the interim too.
Yeah, and anybody can. I will say my email. It's
Okay.
For the
For the public
television or whatever.
listening
It's
at home.
M for Morgan, B as in Butler, JOHNST, which is the beginning of my last name, Johnston, at illinois.edu, which is, so repeating, MBJOHNST at illinois.edu.
Okay,
Thanks.
great, thanks. Our next topic tonight is about the Complete Streets audit recommendations. If you all saw the news, the League of Illinois Bicyclists did an audit of different cities around the state and sampled a couple particular streets to give them a score. And, you know, some of our streets scored really well, and they loved Goodwin Avenue, for example, and other of our streets they gave particular feedback about. So Brad and Rebecca kind of dug into their report, which is public, and I hope people looked at it, but Brad and Rebecca have sort of come with some comments on each of the recommendations that were in the report and where Urbana's already doing things and some other things we can do on top of it. So the wide handout you have is... Okay. So Brad, take it away.
Thank you. Just kind of going through them quickly, we'll start at number 1 and move our way down. These were specific recommendations as part of the audit, and I just wanted to kind of respond as far as how Urbana was addressing those recommendations. The first was to adopt policies to prevent sidewalk gaps at undeveloped parcels. This would be, affecting new developments, and we do have that addressed in our subdivision and land development code. We do require sidewalks on both sides of the street for any new residential or commercial development. Presently, the code has in it that it is only required on the side of the street, on one side of the street for industrial developments. One of the things we're in the process of doing is going through and revising our land and subdivision development code, and we're looking at possibly modifying that and requiring it on both sides of the street for industrial, so all 3 land uses would have it on both sides. Also point out that in areas of Urbana that don't have sidewalk on one or both sides of the street, we do keep a map and inventory of that, and as funds are available, we plan to go in and retrofit or construct sidewalks in there to fill in the gaps. And that is part of the capital improvement plan that was presented last night to council. I think it's figure H in there, and we plan to try to fill in those gaps in the existing areas as well as with the new subdivision code, prevent any future gaps as Urbana continues to develop outward and have infill development as well. Their second recommendation was to require sidewalks to have a minimum 5-foot width. You can tell these first couple are related to pedestrian mobility, and like I mentioned earlier, we're looking at revisions to the land development code, and one of the revisions we're looking at is presently it only requires a 4-foot wide sidewalk. We're looking at increasing that to 5 foot as part of those revisions. And internally, as a public works policy, we, on any sidewalk, existing sidewalk that's under 5 foot, if we're replacing more than a quarter block of it, then we go up to a 5-foot sidewalk as a replacement. The reason we have that quarter mark or quarter block criteria is if we're only taking out a couple panels because tree roots have heaved it. You don't want a 3.5-foot sidewalk and then 2 panels of 5 foot, and then it goes back down to 3.5. So if we're doing half a block where it's a substantial amount of sidewalk, we'll transition to the 5 foot, and then where we tie back into the existing, we'll transition into that. Their third recommendation was to use raised corner islands or median islands where sidewalks cross wide multi-lane intersections. And we are presently doing this on our street reconstruction projects. For us, our street reconstruction projects are the best opportunity. We're in there, we're tearing up the street, replacing the curb, replacing the pavement. So as those projects develop and move forward, we plan to try to incorporate, pedestrian and bicycle improvements as part of that. And we'll continue to move forward on that. Some examples, obviously Goodwin Avenue in Springfield. We also try to work with the transit district if they need bump outs for the buses as well, address it at that time.
I don't know. I don't quite understand. Raised corner islands, is that what we call curb bump outs?
I believe so.
No, they're pork chops.
Those
They're
would be
where they dump the snow. So you.
So you're thinking that raised corner islands are more like
When you have
like
channelized
at
right
Illinois
turns.
or at Lincoln and University, where there's an island. It's not beautiful, but it exists.
Yeah, I have to look at it. When you have channelized right turn lane and you go across that,
So like Broadway and University also has that.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
So this particular thing does not refer to what happened at Goodwin and Springfield, which is the curb bump outs.
Yeah, you're correct.
Yeah.
Moving on to item number 4, improve accessibility of pedestrian facilities. The city does have an ADA compliance plan for addressing the accessibility of pedestrian facilities. We're actually in the process of revisiting this plan and revising it and bringing it up to date. The city's goal is obviously to bring all our sidewalk ramps, up to the current ADA standards, which have recently changed. So we will continue to focus our efforts on that. Their 5th recommendation was to adopt and implement AASHTO's guide for planning, design, and operation of pedestrian facilities, and we will evaluate that and incorporate parts of that into our own city roadway design guidelines. The same thing with the Federal Highway Administration, new sidewalk installation guidelines. Item number 7, adopt roadway design standards to accommodate bicycles where there is existing or latent need. We point to the bicycle master plan and, our continued implementation of that as an example of our goals regarding that item. Adopt roadway design standards with bicycle accommodation determined by traffic speed counts, road classification, and a number of crossings. And this kind of ties into our efforts on complete streets. Like I mentioned, we're revising that land and subdivision code, and one of the things we're looking at doing as part of that is requiring any new street that's going to be designed and constructed in Urbana to tie into the bicycle master plan. If there's a continuation of facilities as part of, that's shown in the master plan, they would have to continue that, for whatever new street. And if there's a point of connection, they would have to provide that, as well as requiring any new streets to be designed to provide a bicycle level of service of 2.5 or below. And the engineer for the developer that was designing those facilities would actually have to submit those calculations to the engineering division. Those would have to be, reviewed. And I'll point out that that's a proposal that would, changes to the land and subdivision code have to go through the Planning Commission and ultimately be adopted by council. But that would be our recommendation, is to require that. Moving down to item number 9, for rural cross-section roads in urban areas, adopt a paved shoulder policy with varying according to traffic counts, avoid rumble strips. We presently follow this. I think the only area where we really have this is on Windsor Road with the rumble strips we have. And I believe Jennifer designed those with the spacing to allow bicyclists to be able to avoid any road hazards by being able to exit out into the travel lane. Adopt proactive intersection design policies, including those discussed in the audit and in AASHTO's guide for planning. And once again, that kind of ties into our road reconstruction project efforts. On every one of our road reconstruction and resurfacing projects going forward, we're taking a complete streets strategy look at it and looking at what we need to do to better accommodate pedestrians and bicyclists as part of that. Because like I said, that is the best opportunity for us to get in and upgrade the street facilities to accommodate everybody's mobility. Item number 11, provide sensitive traffic loops to detect the presence of on-road bicycle and motorcycles. This is an area we have some work to do on, but we intend to look more into this and where warranted to go ahead and explore that.
Does Urbana use any video detection for actuating traffic signals?
I'd have to check with our transportation engineers, but I'm not aware of any that we do.
We have one at Oak and Kirby on campus, and I like it. It's been working pretty well from
Is it set up for bicyclists then
Yeah,
too?
so
Okay.
so the video stares at the roadway,
Mm-hmm.
and it actually sees the sidewalks as well. And then you draw a square around the space that if something comes into that space and stays there, so it's not just driving through, riding through, walking through, then that actuates the signal.
Well, if you could, I'd be interested in some information on that. That
Yeah.
I imagine that'd be fairly easy to implement too, because you don't have to tear the pavement up to try to put in detector loops.
Right,
and-
you don't have the loops, but I guess there's been some concern about snow, but we haven't found any of those problems becoming too bad. I don't have to deal with it when there's snow there, so I might not be informed. But yeah.
Comment on that, and then another question. Those work pretty well, but they do require light, so an unlit bicycle may not trigger that, obviously, at night. And even with a light on the roadway, may not be enough to trigger it. So sometimes you'll have to take your light and shine it up there. I don't know about ours in particular, but those are the general comments on those by bicyclists. And the question I had is, when you say installing bicycle-sensitive, detectors, I thought this was a matter of adjusting the sensitivity of what's there. Is that not the case? Once they're in, you can't do anything with them? Because I'm finding more of these that are not sensitive. Some of the new ones out, Philo, by the Pines and stuff, are not working for bikes. You can't just tweak those?
I'll have to check with our transportation and signal engineers and find out, but I mean, it was actually a recommendation by the Illinois League of Cyclists to provide the sensitive traffic loops, that are able to detect the bicyclists.
I think they all can if they're calibrated right. Trouble is then if they're too sensitive, then like a truck in the next lane may set off the one you don't want to. So there's a fine line there. But I'd like to learn more about those because I'm finding a bunch of them in both Champaign-Urbana that are not working for bikes now.
Yeah, and I'll do some additional research into that, Gary, and get back to you on that.
Gary, can you email a list of the ones, like you said, near the Pines and Philo Road?
Yeah.
If you send a list again of the ones that aren't, when Brad does talk to the traffic engineer, it'd be good to specifically know, are those ones that have the dial that can be tuned? We could go out there and take a bike out there and tune it and test it, and if that's possible.
I started a Google forum, and some people were contributing to.
Okay.
I can look at that and let people know about it.
Brian?
This conversation makes me think of the new push button on Fairview, crossing Lincoln. There's a button out on the edge of the road for a bike to be able to push to activate the light. Is that what it's? But I'm not sure that that's the best plan.
Yeah, I don't think that's a recommended.
No, that's what it is. It's for the bike.
Yeah, but I think the bicyclists are looking more for the detector loop, so they don't have to.
Right. I was just going to comment on that. As a bike that uses that route, that makes me get all the way over to the edge to push that button, and then cars are likely to want to come around me to turn right while we're waiting for it to change. I just wanted to say that's.
Yeah, I think we've kind of learned our lesson with that one.
Okay.
Okay.
And we'll move forward in a different direction.
Okay. Okay, go ahead, Brad. I think you were on about number 11.
Okay. Moving to number 12, improve the accessibility of roadway crossings. And I mentioned earlier, we have the ADA, compliance plan that we'll be working on for pedestrians. In particular, improving the ramp safety. Moving on, item number 13, place more emphasis on non-motorized accommodation where the context and need is greatest. The city has recently adopted a complete streets policy, and we're in the process of implementing it. Like I mentioned, we're working on revisions to the land and subdivision code, as well as looking at what internal policies we need to modify in order to effectively implement that complete streets strategy on all our future transportation projects. Item number 14, extra care should be taken in planning for pedestrians and cyclists on roads that are used for bus routes. Just point out, we do work very closely and cooperatively with the Mass Transit District to address these issues. And finally, number 15 was to recognize that cyclists and pedestrians are expected on all roadways unless explicitly prohibited. And once again, that's a goal of Urbana, is to have complete streets that are accessible to all modes of transportation for all levels of users. And we'll continue to move forward on that.
Cool. Any questions for Brad? Yeah, Gary.
Is Ed Borsari going to get these back, or are you providing this information to the league?
Yeah, I was just thinking of that. We should send it.
Yeah, we can send it
If you
back.
send it to me,
Okay.
They did ask us for our comments earlier, and we did provide feedback to them
Yeah, we provided
before they
some
released
initial
this.
but I
comments
was
back
going
on
to
the
share this
board.
with Ed anyway.
Yeah, it'd be great to share this just so they see it comes full circle and they get a sense of, okay, here's how a community can follow up on our recommendations and take some action.
No, and I definitely, because at our last meeting, one of the items for discussion was the fact that this was really labor intensive, and so we need to examine, is this something that they want to continue or to move forward in a different direction about? So these comments will have a lot to, add to that. If people are paying attention to them, then, it may be worth continuing to explore.
My other feedback about the process is The ones that are the most specific, to me, were the most helpful.
Right.
You know, implement this particular policy or check about the exact 5 feet width requirement. Whereas the ones like extra care should be taken in planning for peds and bikelists, or recognize that cyclists and peds can be expected on roadways. Well, how can the city say, okay, well, we now recognize that peds are expected, or we do take extra care? That's not something we can measure so much, like, oh, yep, we can now measure the fact that we're taking extra care. Those are very hard to operationalize and say, we're going to do it, and then we can check it off the list and know we've accomplished that. But the specific ones I really like, because they're things we can go back to our code and do. So that's just my 2 cents.
Cool. That's all I had. Appreciate your input.
Thanks. Okay, our last major topic tonight is the walk-friendly community designation, and Rebecca Bird did some looking into this designation and what it takes. So Rebecca, tell us what you've learned and what recommendations or ideas you have for moving forward.
It's a relatively new program and a new designation, so there aren't many communities that have been designated walk-friendly communities. And the first thing I noticed was that it would require a lot of staff time to even start thinking about applying, and that is, yes.
I'm sorry, because I don't know the background, but what organization offers this?
It is the...
Are there multiple choices, and this is the one that we thought would be worth looking into, or is this the
No, this
national?
is this is similar to, it's not, obviously because it's not bicycles, but it's the equivalent of bicycle-friendly
So
designation.
Is it endorsed by the APBP Association?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What
It
is
is not
APBP?
theirs. Association of
Pedestrian
and Bicycle Professionals.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it is. It does have the 5 E's, but it also has a section on a status of walking in your community and a planning section as well. So I'll kind of just go through quickly what the different parts of the application, and this is kind of a pre-application. This is an assessment of whether or not you're ready to apply. But I think basically if you did this, if you figured all of this out, then you would probably be ready to apply. But the first section is just a profile of your community, the population, the square miles, that type of thing. The next section is about the status of walking in your community, and we have a fantastic number of walkers here. It's in the 2000 census, 17%. In the 2005 to 2009 estimates of the American Community Survey, it was 18.9%. So that's phenomenal for a community our size. Then goes on to talk about, to ask about crashes, pedestrian and motor vehicle crashes, and trends or significant changes in the status of walking in your community in recent years. And then in planning, it talks about, it stresses that you should have a pedestrian plan, which we don't. We have talked about a pedestrian plan. We do have a lot of plans that deal with pedestrians. So our comprehensive plan, which is like the guiding document for the city, that has one of its 4 cornerstone goals is about having a multimodal community. And so it does talk about pedestrians and making our community accessible to pedestrians. There are several pieces in our capital improvements plan that deal specifically with pedestrians. So we do have, as Brad referred to earlier, Figure H. This is a map of Urbana, and all of the lines in red, which look like a lot, but what you can't see from that back distance is all the other lines on here. So the red lines are places where we don't have sidewalks. Those are the sidewalks that are missing. The yellow, these are expected to be constructed in the next 10 years, and then the other areas. But some of them, although it would be better, obviously, to have sidewalks, some of these areas are very low traffic areas, and so it's not as though pedestrians are seriously in danger, whereas on some of our collector and arterial streets where we're lacking sidewalks, that's much more significant. And then, as Brad mentioned, Public Works is also updating the pedestrian plan for ADA accessibility, and that would be a big part of feeding into a pedestrian plan as well. We could do a pedestrian plan simultaneously while doing the ADA plan, but a lot of that information would feed into a pedestrian plan, and so in a lot of ways it would make sense to wait until that plan is finished and use that information. It would then be a lot more efficient and a lot less expensive for us to do a pedestrian plan after that. That update is expected to take 2 years because they'll mainly be doing the data collection with interns, and that type of work is mostly in the summer. And so it would be next summer and the summer after. It does ask about whether or not we have specific safety goals for pedestrians, if we have a pedestrian safety action plan, as well as a pedestrian master plan. Then it does talk about ADA and what percentage of your sidewalks are compliant and so on, an estimate at least. We have a very outdated plan, but it was never, I'm not sure, do you know when that was created?
Are you talking about the ADA
Yes.
plan? So we don't have something that's just like
Current.
recent data or annual
No.
data about the accessibility?
That's one of the reasons.
The university
that we're-
doesn't have it yet either. We're kind of working on.
I mean, they created a map back in 1991 of the different sidewalk ramp locations. Unfortunately, we have not done a good job of tracking what we've completed since then, so it's out of date in that way. It's also because the ADA standards have changed so substantially since then that a lot of what they considered compliant back then would not be compliant anymore. The slopes have changed. You know, back then you could get away with tining the concrete rather than having the truncated domes. So we're really taking the approach of actually having to pretty much go back to scratch and have to go and actually inspect every ramp at every intersection and determine whether it's ADA compliant or not, and then coming up with a prioritization plan, you know, to direct our efforts, you know, and we're looking at, you know, kind of a two-pronged approach to it. One looks at, you know, what the utilization of that area is. You know, there's more points weighted if there's disabled individuals that would, you know, use those facilities. You know, whether it's in a university district or in a business district, that there's a lot of pedestrian volume, as well as looking at the physical condition of the ramp. Is it non-compliant just because it doesn't have the truncated domes, or is it actually a barrier curb that, you know, vertically drops off, you know, and trying, you know, because we're going to find there's a lot of non-compliant ramps, and we want to hit the ones and focus our efforts on the ones where we kind of get the most bang for our buck.
So it then goes on to ask about a complete streets policy, which, as has been mentioned this evening, was recently adopted. You reviewed that, and it was adopted by the City Council. So that is now part of our comprehensive plan. And so we have that section. We're still working on some of the implementation features, and we'll be, as Brad said, changing, amending the subdivision code, as well as internal policies and practices to implement that. And so we would have that part of it. It does talk about parking and parking standards, whether or not currently our zoning ordinance has parking, minimum parking requirements, and many communities have moved to, well, I guess best practices now has moved to maximum parking requirements instead of minimum, so that instead of having a large big box, I was about to say a name, but I won't, a large big box come in and you give them, you know, you need 500 spaces, and they decide, but we really want 1,500, but you would have a maximum instead of a minimum. That we have not done. It asks about your percentage of development that is infill development as opposed to out on the edges and therefore less pedestrian friendly in general. So that's most of the planning section. It then goes on to education and encouragement, and in this part we would be relatively strong. It talks about safe routes to school, and we do have a strong safe routes to school program. I don't know that we have, Michelle is not here this evening, but she could probably answer this a bit better, but I don't know that we have a lot of other events, encouragement events for pedestrians.
There's a walking club, the I want to say Ridge Walkers, and there's there's the moonwalk that you mentioned, but there's, I know on campus they have regular walks now every week since the Wellness Center started doing those, but I don't know if they, I don't know if that's something that reaches into the communities in terms of inviting participants, or if it is really focused on the U of I employees and students. But it's something that could be grown, probably.
Good to know. It also talks about wayfinding and signage for pedestrians, which we don't have a lot of. We do have wayfinding and signage plan for the downtown area, and that would kind of extend to certain other corridors, directing people to some of the high traffic areas in town that will be implemented over the next several years, probably more than several, actually.
You know, just before I forget, the runners clubs are pedestrians. So all of the
that's a good
running
point.
events are related to that.
That's a good point. Then we get into the engineering, and that once we have modified our subdivision code and our manual of practice, we should have most of this information. It talks about what percentage of your arterials, for example, have sidewalks, because those are the most important streets for sidewalks, to have sidewalks. Talking about a plan to repair and replace broken sidewalks. A method to report missing sidewalks or issues with sidewalks and so on. And then it gets into bridges and overpasses, how pedestrians are dealt with there, and about intersection crosswalk markings. And then we go on to enforcement, and it simply asks about your how many police officers you have, and are there any pedestrian enforcement programs in place. If you have a specific traffic safety officer, media campaigns, both directed at the pedestrians as well as at drivers. And then it talks about evaluation. How do you measure your pedestrian improvements? Do you have a specific goal? Do you do counts? Do you have a baseline count? Do you do yearly or every so often counts to see if you are improving and meeting your goals? So that's kind of an overview. There's a lot more detail in there, and I'm sure the actual application has more detail than that as well. But what we talked about was that it would probably make sense for us to. We could go ahead and work on this. It would require being a priority of the city is devoting the staff time to it. But it might make more sense to wait until we do have the ADA plan, and then we work on a pedestrian plan, and then we apply. So which is the same process we went through with bicycle-friendly designation. We had the plan in place, and then we applied, which is why we were able to get designation. Without that plan in place, I doubt, that we would have gotten that. There is another campaign, just one second, the Michelle Obama's Let's Move campaign, which is kind of combating childhood obesity, and we are starting an Urbana Let's Move campaign. And so we did talk at that meeting that working towards pedestrian-friendly designation, walk-friendly designation would, it could be folded into that movement as well. So I think we will continue. We won't rule out working towards this now, but it may be that it just makes more sense to wait.
Gary, do you have a question?
Yeah, question. If you achieve this designation, how long is it good for? When does it have to be renewed? Do you know? Is it 4 years?
I think it's every 3 years.
Every 3 years?
I think. Mm-hmm.
Okay, because we're due up for 2014 for the bicycle one to renew. So it'd be nice if they didn't show up at the same time, but if it's every 3 years, it's going to be possible to avoid that at some point. That's good.
But once you have the designation, presumably you're simply explaining what you've done since then, and so you're only trying to do a 3-year, you know what you've done in the last 3 years, which is much easier than starting from scratch.
Any other comments? I mean,
I have
yeah,
a comment.
Morgan.
Just the fact, just as you ran through that, it got my mind roaming about all of the different things that we could be doing for pedestrians. I mean, there was a discussion a few years ago about possibly doing a pedestrian sting event, which is extremely highly publicized event where the police officers will pull over vehicles that don't stop for pedestrians and crosswalks. But I mean, you just barrage the public with, we're going to do this, and then you have an officer with a sign ahead of time saying, pedestrians sting ahead, yield for pedestrians in the crosswalk, and you have all kinds of, it's very clear that you need to stop, and there's still vehicles that don't stop, and then those get pulled over, and I think the first week they get ticketed, and the first week they get warned, and the next week they get ticketed. That concept, there's things like that we could be doing as a community, that this could give us ideas, even as the other things are going on, as the ADA plan is being revised and all that.
I mean, I like the suggestion of doing the PED plan with the ADA plan kind of in concert. I mean, it's so much of the same work, having to check for crosswalks and ramps and curb cuts and things. So I don't know, does it take any extra amount of effort, or the interns that we already are going to have over the course of the coming 2 years for the ADA plan? Is it an easier incremental effort for them to take that on, or is there still some decision making that we'd have to do to decide to make it a full PED plan, not just an ADA plan? Because it seems like that's the big hurdle that we should maybe try to get through in the next 2 years to then apply.
Well, I think we were thinking about using the Champaign Regional Planning Commission, since they did our bicycle master plan, to lead the effort on that. What we were kind of thinking was, before we engaged into the master plan, we wanted to have the ADA completed and have that inventory, because we think a key component of the master plan will be having an inventory of, what existing pedestrian facilities you have and, what condition they're in. So we're kind of thinking that once the ADA compliance plan was done and we had gone through and done that survey, that would kind of feed into that master plan and provide the information the planners would need to come up with a plan as, how do we become more pedestrian friendly? How do we improve the continuity of the pedestrian network? But, right now we don't really have a good inventory of our sidewalk system. So kind of that first step would be getting that inventory so we know what we have.
Rebecca?
I think, though, I took a look. There are not many communities that have pedestrian plans. They're very unusual. Most planning for pedestrians is folded into other sorts of planning documents. So often there'll be a transportation master plan that has, often it doesn't even have a separate pedestrian chapter. It has pedestrian pieces mixed into other bits of it. But I did take a look at a couple of designated pedestrian plans, and they did not have those specific inventories. So I think just like if you compare the Urbana Bicycle Master Plan with the Champaign Vision, they're very different levels, right? So Urbana's has an inventory and has examined everything very detailed, whereas Champagne's is more of, this is what we would like to create, and when we have the opportunities, we'll move in this direction. But it hasn't worked everything out. So there are different levels of a pedestrian plan as well, and that is something we could talk about whether or not. But as we're already doing the one plan, that the ADA plan, and we need to do that, I don't know if it does seem like it would be kind of wasted to not take advantage of incorporating that into it. Otherwise, you would have this more policy and vision document, and you would be missing out on all of the more detailed implementation plan that, like our master plan for bicycles has.
Morgan?
So, in my opinion, just my personal opinion, I think they should be together as well. And I was thinking about what you said, Brad, about the take the inventory and then go into the pedestrian plan after that. And on the bicycle plan, we did, well, you guys did the inventory as a component of the plan. So all of the bicycle level of service data had to be gathered about those specific line items in the process. And so if I think that there really is an opportunity to do it together in tandem. Maybe it's get started, because as you're going along also, the decisions about what is priority, that seems to come from more of the pedestrian plan aspect. So doing just the inventory is great and time intensive, but it doesn't give you the prioritization based on the pedestrian routes and the users and sort of the goals for where we expect to have the high volumes of pedestrians. So I don't think you can complete the ADA plan without starting the pedestrian plan. But you can complete the inventory.
So maybe this obviously isn't a decision or anything tonight, but if you all at a staff level can continue to talk about just how this, over the coming 2 years, how this makes sense and how it all fits in, that would be great. And at any time that you all want to provide an update to the commission, or you have some more perspective on how this could work, that'd be great. Any final comments on that topic before we move on? Okay. The last business item tonight is just some updates on a few different projects. And I think, Brad, you might have some pictures on the screen here for us about the first one. The Broadway Avenue and Boneyard Creek, and also the High Cross Road bike path are the two updates.
Yes, and you should all be getting a invite in your email boxes. On December 13th, we're going to have a public meeting on this. December 12th, we'll be presenting to council, which is a Monday, and then Tuesday, December 13th, the next day, we'll be having a public meeting over at the Urbanic Civic Center to present this to the public. So you guys are kind of getting an advanced preview here, but we do have the 75%, which is more of a final design. We're getting very close to completion of the design and are looking forward to moving into construction. But we wanted to just take this opportunity to present what the design drawings are to the committee and solicit any input that you would have. The first series of drawings I'm going to show you are the actual Boneyard Creek improvements. This is the one I had the 3D model for. I think I presented maybe 2 meetings ago. And it's for the section of the Boneyard Creek between Griggs Street, which is kind of over by Ray Street, by Silver Creek, and Broadway Avenue. So what we've got here, and I apologize, it's a lot harder to see it in 2-dimensional on the engineering drawings, but what you can see in here, this is from the landscape architect series of drawings, but they've got kind of shaded here what the concrete paths are. But the way the proposed, and it's a multi-use path, it's an 8-foot wide multi-use path. It could be shared by pedestrians and bicyclists. But there's a connection on Ray Street and Griggs Street. There would be a compliant ramp here. You've got sidewalks down both sides of Ray Street going north-south. But there's a pathway system constructed where, and this would all be ADA compliant, slopes and cross slopes, that comes down, and the creek is over here. So it comes right along the creek. It goes actually under the Ray Street Bridge, headed east, and we'll have to go to the next slide to see it. There is also a series of terrace steps that allow users, if they want to bypass kind of the long circular route, they're able to access down here and tie into the path network under the bridge. And there is about 12 feet of drop from the top of the street level channel down to the pathway system. So, if you're taking it on a bicycle, it might be, a little bit of excitement with the curved paths. You see this is Ray Street over here, so you cross under Ray Street. Once again, there's kind of a series of terrace steps that would bring you back up to street level and tie you into the sidewalk network on Ray Street. The path continues along the creek. Over here is a railroad culvert, which they're going to fill in one side, and the path will extend actually through the railroad culvert. There's also an ADA compliant path system that comes back and connects up with kind of a plaza area. This is the Station Theater over here. So this will be a plaza area. That also allows pedestrians, to connect in with the trestle bridge. This is a wooden railroad trestle bridge that is abandoned a number of years ago. We're going to actually convert that into a pedestrian bridge that connects Ray Street, over to this plaza area next to the Station Theater. Like I mentioned, the path system also continues to the east. The wrong way. Over here is the UCSD pipe crossing, which you see right here. So the pathway bumps out to get around it. Once again, it's continuing along at street level. There is a creek crossing here, some stones that will be placed across that people can actually walk across the creek to the opposite side. And the path continues up to the Broadway Avenue and ties in at street level. There'll be a sidewalk here along Broadway Avenue that it ties into.
What's the building to the north of where that comes out on Broadway? Is that the...
This one up here, where my arrow is?
Yeah. Like, where's the railroad crossing?
Well, that's actually back a couple. Let me go. This is actually the railroad crossing here.
But once you get to Broadway, where is it? To the north or the south of...
It would be to the south.
Okay.
So let me go back that way. The railroad crossing is up. I'm sorry, it's down here. Yeah. It comes back alongside the building there. So with that, we'll jump. The next thing I'd like to show you is the Broadway Avenue bike paths. And we're going to be reconstructing Broadway Avenue from Ray Street up to just a little bit south of the intersection. IDOT actually owns University Avenue, so we won't be improving actually through the intersection since they just repaved it 2 years ago. But we'll be starting down at Water Street. You can see we're doing a road diet. The existing pavement is fairly wide. And you can see we're essentially bumping out the edge of curb to create wider parkways. It's basically be taking it from a 4-lane street cross-section down to a 2-lane. We'll also have bike lanes in each direction, 6 foot wide. I just want to kind of walk you through this. So starting down at Water Street, headed north.
Sorry.
No problem.
Why are you starting at Water instead of farther to the south?
Well, that's the project limits. We will be striping all the way down to Main Street and tying into the Main Street bike lanes. But as part of this project scope, the limit of it was set at Water Street. Now the Main Street project will include Broadway Avenue from Water Street down to Main and possibly even a little further south. But this is kind of an artificial delineation, that was created as far as what was included in each project. And I guess I'll point out, too, what you're seeing on this, some of these are streetscape improvements, so we're putting in the brick band that's consistent with the downtown streetscape. We'll be putting some of the other facilities as far as the lighting, the L72 lamp posts that are consistent with what we have downtown, the benches, trash receptacles. While you also be planting the parkways and ornamental trees and really trying to enhance the visual aspect of the area. But the bike lanes continue north.
Is that the County Market bus stop?
This
Or
one in here?
Used to be Save a Lot now, I guess?
Yeah.
Okay.
This would be going, once again, continuing up north. I will point out that there is some parking along here, and that's actually I probably need to go back one. You can see. Let's see, I gotta find it. You can see that's what these hash marks are here. So there is some on-street parking that's provided in areas to accommodate on-street parking. And once again, this is just heading up north. This is where Courtesy Road comes in, kind of over by the laundromat. This would be the railroad crossing.
And the boneyard,
Yeah, this would be the start of the boneyard right here. This is where the Broadway Avenue Bridge is. And then this is where it ties into University Avenue, which we would really appreciate your input on as but we have the bike lanes coming up. Like I said, unfortunately, we're not improving all the way through the intersection, so the bike lanes kind of come to an end. I'm not sure what the best way to transition that is.
What does the Urbana, sorry, just really focused on it. What's the Urbana master plan have for Broadway north of University?
The bike lanes extend north.
It is bike lanes in the
Yeah.
future. And does the Urbana plan show anything on University, even though it's not, okay. I
No.
didn't think-
Yeah, there's no bike lanes on. But they do
'cause
extend
it's
north.
not city jurisdiction.
Yeah, well, I think there's some issues with the, amount of traffic. But
We'll talk about that later.
That's a whole different decision. But, I mean, it seems like, our traditional way of sort of ending the bike lane is to turn it into a dashed edge at the intersection, which I guess would be good. This also might be a good place for a Sharrow bike stamp,
okay.
to show bikes, okay, if the lane is ending, to show them then what position
They
and
should be in.
alignment they should head for, so that if they're going to proceed across University and continue on Broadway, they're lined up and headed in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, unlike others, yeah, on Washington. What other suggestions do people have about the bike lane there? Gary?
Yeah, a few things. More typically, when you do a road dive from 4 lanes, you wind up with a center turn lane, and that's not here. And I was wondering sort of why there is no center turn lane needed further down on, Main Street, or are you familiar with what went into that?
Well, our consultant did we hired Foth and engineers to do the assessment of, and they determined, there wasn't enough traffic volume in order to necessitate having that turn lane. What you're seeing mostly along in here, these are drive entrances to the businesses in there. They have a tendency, most of the businesses along there are fairly low volume, so there's not a lot of turning movements. So it gave us an opportunity. We were, this was designated as a bike route, so we were going to have the bike lanes on there regardless. What it has allowed us to do is bump out the curb line and create, larger parkways.
Right.
We're going to be incorporating in some bioswale,
Right.
stormwater treatment.
Okay. So that's the trade-off. It seems like a good trade-off if you don't have a lot of traffic.
Mhm.
Do you know the width of the parking lanes where there is parking? I haven't been able to pick up any numbers on that.
Let's see if we can zoom in a little bit and catch them.
Because I see 6-foot bike lanes and 10.5-foot travel lanes.
Let's see if we can. I don't know if there's some on the south side here. Yeah. I might have to get back to you on that, Gary. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but there's no measurements that I
Yeah,
can see.
I think that's the issue. I don't know if I'll have to go back and check on that. I don't see any measurements on any of them. So I will have to get back to you on that one, Gary.
Morgan?
One of the things that we worked through in CUATS was revision to the access guidelines. And this just looks like an excellent opportunity to reduce some of the curb cuts.
Yeah, we've been
Has that
working with
been considered?
the property owners to try to reduce and eliminate any that aren't necessary. It's always a challenge working with property owners because they always claim they need every single one, and we've been working with them and have been able to eliminate a couple. But it's tough because
So
you have to
this
balance.
actually does have some removed.
Yes.
And on a similar note, the this area from just as a community member, it seems that there's a very large amount of off-street parking. And so is the on-street parking, what are the pros and cons to that on-street parking, considering there's quite a bit of just pavement? Like, maybe you could pull up.
Well, I mean,
Google
one of the issues
Docs
is
or
a lot of the
maps.
off-street parking is private.
So
You
it's
know, a lot of
private,
it's owned
okay.
by the Timponi family. So, you know, as far as public parking, I think it is kind of limited, you know, through that area.
Yeah, and the off-street parking will hopefully be eliminated
With infill.
with infill redevelopment. I mean, there are some pictures like in the downtown plan for how all new development on Broadway should front the sidewalk with large retail windows on the first floor and residential above, and so we want all the building to situate right along the sidewalk for that whole corridor. So hopefully the parking excesses will be solved.
Then the final project I wanted to show you was the High Cross bike path. And this one, I was hoping to have some pictures from out in the field, but because of the wet weather, they've been delayed getting started on this one. The contractor was hopeful to get in this fall and get some of the work done around where the bike bridge is supposed to go, but because of the wet weather, they haven't been able to get in and get started. The original project schedule was set up off a spring start for their construction efforts, so it's not setting them back any. They're just hoping to get in and kind of get some early work done this fall, and it hasn't worked out. But I just want to kind of show you the plans. You've got, this is Windsor Road over here, so you're tying into, you know, the existing bike path along Windsor Road right at this transition point. It is an 8-foot wide path. In this particular section, it is a asphalt path, and we'll just follow it as it heads north. I'll point out too, you know, High Cross Road is down here. This is the ditch line along High Cross Road, so it's up right against the property lines, you know, kind of on the far side of the ditch, so it will be fairly isolated from vehicular traffic along High Cross Road. But it extends, this would be proceeding north. Oops, went the wrong way. And I do have a detail of this that we'll take a look at in a couple slides. It just shows a blow up. So it comes along till it gets to Stone Creek Boulevard. Here to tie into some of the existing sidewalk network, they are having to take out some pieces of existing sidewalk and tying in the bike path into that, you know, integrating it within that. At this point, too, you'll notice it switches from being a asphalt path to a concrete path for the remainder of the route. And I believe that has to do with the fact that when they construct the bridge deck surface will be concrete. Basically, it just continues on to the north.
That's the only driveway so far.
Yes. Well, that's not a driveway. That's actually a street.
Oh. Right.
And you see it continues up, and this is where the bridge crossing is. This is that existing ditch through there. You see they're going to be rip-wrapping the channel, and the bridge actually sits here. This is the High Cross Road bridge down here. This would be the pedestrian bridge. And it continues up north. We'll continue to follow it up, basically till it reaches the driveway for the old TK Wendell. So it comes up, and it just terminates on this side of the driveway. You see there's the end of project limits. I did mention I wanted to show a little more detail of the crossing with the Stone Creek Boulevard. So this is just kind of a blow-up of it, showing it in a little more detail. What's hatched here is sidewalk removal. This is existing sidewalk that's coming out, and you can see the other items are, you know, what the new pavement will be. And then it should be a really nice looking bridge.
Where is the center curb on Stone Creek Boulevard? What is it, this drawing here in the middle? Looks like a D, a really tall, skinny D. Is that a curb line, or does the curb start farther north from here?
I think this is what the existing curb line is.
The one there's a median on Stone Creek, is what I'm talking about. I think it's north of there, though. I'm just imagining where a cyclist goes from being on this path to on the street and how that transitions. And so I don't know what that D is.
Yeah, so would you ride
Because if you want
down the sidewalk and down the curb cut and start into the crosswalk, and then you would leave the crosswalk to enter the vehicular lane? Is that how you would transition?
Yeah.
Maybe.
And the same thing coming from the north or headed towards the path from Stone Creek. You know, do you jump up onto the sidewalk and veer around, or do you actually go all the way to the crossing to turn? Because these sidewalks are only 4 feet wide.
Mm-hmm.
Well, these are intended, I
4
believe, for
feet.
pedestrians. I believe the bicyclists are intended to go straight through.
But if they wanted to go onto Stone Creek, is what I'm saying, onto the actual street there.
I wonder, it is a little...
It's hard to see.
Yeah, I wonder if you might... Is there a curb cut up there near the top of your diagram, right there? Is there a curb cut there so that if, say I'm a cyclist and I'm coming from the top of the diagram down onto this page, meaning I guess I'm traveling east.
South.
No,
you're right.
Oh, I'm traveling.
No,
I
you're
think
right.
I'm traveling east.
You're right.
Yeah. I'm traveling east on Stone Creek Boulevard. I'm coming from the neighborhood and I'm deciding, I'm going to take a nice, leisurely trip, or I'm going to go down to dinner at Village Inn Pizza Parlor and head down this path. I might want a curb cut right there where your mouse is to be able to move from being on the street to up on this new path network, so that I don't have to go the whole way down into the intersection with all the busy trucks and traffic, just to transition into the path.
I will check and find out, and if that's a modification we need to make.
Okay.
And on the other side.
Yeah, and I mean, equally on the other side, so that, I guess if you come off the path from the right edge of the screen, and then you want to get into the neighborhood, yeah, you have a way to get down into the neighborhood without having to go closer out to the big trucks and traffic to find a curb cut.
Is there a plan for this to continue north in the future?
Yes.
Okay. I may have
But
missed that.
we have a grant for this portion of it that we received from the state, so the grant runs out at kind of what the project limits are. But the plan is eventually it'll extend all the way up, I believe, to University Avenue. Yeah, let me jump to the bridge. It's kind of a... But this is how it would look, obviously, in section, and then this would be looking at it in plan. But you can see, I mean, it is proposed 12-foot wide, clear width. Like I said, it would have a concrete surface, a broomed finish on it. Actually, let me do this on that.
I'm sorry, but we just talked about how from the Complete Streets audit, there's intentions to have 5-foot wide sidewalks, and you do that now. So why are these 4? Is it too late to change them to 5, just to match the plan, the intention into the future?
I don't know. I will have to check into that.
Yeah, it does say 4.
Yeah.
It might be that it's 4 in the neighborhood already.
It would be 4 up here, but I mean, I see Morgan's point. You could transition from 4 to 5 and make that a 5-foot sidewalk for the rest of it. I'll check into that.
Gary?
And then go back to the boneyard. The minimum width of that path, do you know what that's going to be? Because that also changes, is it?
Well, it's 8 foot at its minimum.
It's 8 foot is minimum. And then, AASHTO guidelines has all kinds of things about clearance on each side and not having drop-offs and sight lines, and I guess those have been observed.
I will check with the consultants, but I believe they followed all the guidelines for that.
Yeah, okay.
There is a buffer. You're not actually traveling right up against the creek edge. I mean, there is a buffer between.
Because there are like some paths, like the Bulware Trail in Champaign, where you can't see anything. It's right up against a retaining wall. It's like 4 feet wide. I mean, it's like every time I go around there, it's like you never know if you're going to smash into somebody coming the other way. So that's an example of how not to do it, and just want to make sure that those guidelines have been established for that they're followed.
Okay, any other feedback on any of these projects? Thank you, Brad, for the updates and all the work on these. It's exciting to be expanding the ped and bike network. We don't have any old business tonight, but I wondered if there were any announcements. Our next meeting will probably be in January because of holidays, so we probably will not do a December. Morgan?
I understand Jennifer Selby's going to be in town soon.
Oh, that's great.
The end of this week. So let us know if you want to try and connect with her when she's here.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great. Gary?
There's some webinars coming up. There's one tomorrow, which I think was communicated around. Do we have place for more people to come to that, Rebecca?
We do indeed. It's on bike lanes against parking, so how to deal with that. And it is at 2 p.m., and it'll be here at the City Building in the Executive Conference Room. The upstairs is now secure, so you'd need to contact me beforehand and then come like 10 minutes early and be escorted upstairs. But if you're interested, please do come. There is room for everyone.
So 10 minutes where? Where do we?
In the lobby.
Right here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you come into the lobby and say you show up and nobody's here to buzz you upstairs, you could go into the community development door. There should be a receptionist at community development, which is right on the right side.
But I'll be in the lobby at around 1:45. Wait for people.
And then on November 30th, there's another webinar which people could sign up on their own if they want. This is, I think, Federal Highways. Safety and operations of pedestrian hybrid beacon and rectangular rapid flashing beacons. So these are some treatments that they're being used to. These are mostly for mid-block crossings of pedestrians. And I saw some of the rapid rectangular flashing beacons in Eugene. They put those all next to their schools, all the arterials, and they seem to be working pretty well. You push a button and these strobes, a little bit like what they try to Granger, but those are not as bright, and they have them in the ground, and they're on all the time, and they need to be changed there. So you could just go to, well, I could send a link to this if people want to register. They can just do this from their home if they want.
So maybe at the January meeting, I know dooring risks is one of the future topics that we were going to wait till this webinar happens.
Yeah.
And maybe you could kind of present a summary of what you've learned at the webinar.
Right.
And if you want to do that about the second webinar about hawk signals and rectangular rapid flashing beacons, that would be cool too, or that can wait for a future meeting as well.
Yeah,
So-
I'd like to do the one on parking and
Okay.
bike infrastructure in particular first.
Okay, so
Because we
maybe,
see all these things are happening.
yeah, maybe we'll try to line that up for January.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Any other announcements? I know one quick note is that you might have seen the article in the News Gazette, but that the mayor and the city council are talking about the snow removal ordinance in Urbana, and hopefully before the snow falls, we'll have an ordinance enacted. I know it's something the mayor is proposing for Campus Town and for downtown, and along safe routes to schools locations, so that there will be some requirements for snow shoveling there, similar to what Champaign does in the downtown. And that's an item that's still up for discussion and debate, and I know the ordinance is still being drafted, but if you have any feedback, feel free to email your city council members or come to a meeting and speak out about it in the coming weeks. Morgan?
Announcement. I I don't believe that we had this information at our last meeting, but the campus area, and you probably all have heard this already, but the campus as a university district, which is not just university-owned areas, but includes Urbana, Champaign, it's been designated as a bicycle-friendly university. So bronze level designation. Many thanks to Gary for helping us get that started as far as filling it out, and Carl Stewart at the Bike Project, who did most of the data entry to get it filled in, and of course to everyone, because it's definitely through all of our efforts that that's happened. So we're excited.